Your mind is either your greatest ally or your greatest obstacle. At this very moment, thousands of thoughts are moving through your awareness. Memories from the past, worries about the future, and endless mental commentary about what is happening around you. Most people accept this constant noise as normal. They wake up thinking, spend the day reacting to distractions, and fall asleep with their minds still racing. But this state of mental chaos is not your natural condition. It is simply a pattern your brain has learned, and anything that is learned can be unlearned. A quiet mind is not an empty mind. It is a clear and intentional mind, a mind that thinks when thinking is useful and rests when it is not. Neuroscience shows that when mental noise decreases, the brain makes better decisions, regulates emotions more effectively, and focuses attention on what truly matters. When the mind becomes calm, clarity emerges. Energy once wasted on endless rumination becomes available for creativity, insight, and purposeful action. This audiobook will show you how to train your mind, reduce mental noise, and build a foundation of awareness that allows you to live with greater clarity, resilience, and intention. If you're ready to rise above the noise, like the video. It tells YouTube you're choosing awareness over autopilot. Subscribe now, and don't miss the next chapter in your evolution. And remember, the deepest transformation belongs to those who stay until the very end. Chapter 1. The Mental Noise Prison. Most people are trapped in what could be called a mental noise prison, and the most dangerous part is that they do not even realize they are locked inside it. The constant chatter in their mind feels so normal that they assume this is simply how human consciousness works. They wake up thinking, they spend the day thinking, and they fall asleep with thoughts still spinning through their heads. But what feels normal is often just familiar, and familiarity can hide dysfunction. Think about the way most people begin their day. Before their body is fully awake, their mind is already racing. Thoughts immediately appear. What do I need to do today? Did I forget something important yesterday? What if that meeting doesn't go well? Why did I say that awkward thing in that conversation last night? Within seconds, the mind begins constructing a narrative of problems and possibilities, and before long, the person reaches for their phone. Notifications appear. Messages demand attention. News headlines introduce new worries that have nothing to do with the person's immediate reality. Within minutes of waking up, the mind has already absorbed dozens of external signals competing for attention. The day has not even begun, yet the mental noise is already loud. Throughout the rest of the day, the same pattern continues. The mind jumps from thought to thought, like a restless monkey, swinging from branch to branch. You might be having a conversation with someone, but part of your attention is already thinking about the next task waiting on your list. You might be working on an important project, but your focus keeps drifting toward emails, messages, or random thoughts about unrelated concerns. Even during moments that should feel meaningful, spending time with people you care about, enjoying a meal, walking outside, your mind is often somewhere else entirely. This scattered mental activity does more than create discomfort. It destroys potential. When your attention is constantly fragmented, deep thinking becomes impossible. And when deep thinking becomes impossible, complex problems remain unsolved. Creativity weakens. Decisions become reactive instead of strategic. Life becomes a sequence of urgent responses rather than a deliberate pursuit of what truly matters. The mental noise prison is built from three powerful forces that reinforce each other constantly. The first is thought addiction. Your brain has become addicted to stimulation. Just as the body can become dependent on certain chemicals, The mind can become dependent on constant streams of thought and information. Silence begins to feel uncomfortable. Stillness feels unnatural. When nothing is happening, the brain automatically generates something: memories, worries, fantasies, predictions. Your mind craves the next thought the same way an addict craves the next dose. This is why many people feel compelled to check their phone every few minutes, even when nothing important is happening. It is not always about information. It is about stimulation. The brain has learned to associate constant input with relief from internal restlessness. But the relief is temporary. Each new piece of stimulation briefly quiets the mind, only to reinforce the cycle of dependence. The second force that keeps people trapped in the mental noise prison is emotional reactivity. When the mind is noisy, emotions become amplified. Small problems begin to feel enormous. Minor disagreements feel like personal attacks. Everyday stress begins to feel overwhelming. This happens because mental noise distorts perception. Instead of responding to reality, you begin responding to your interpretation of reality. And those interpretations are often shaped by fear, anxiety, and unconscious assumptions. A simple email from a colleague might trigger hours of worry about hidden criticism. A neutral comment from a friend might be interpreted as rejection. The mind creates stories, and the emotional system reacts as if those stories are facts. When this cycle repeats often enough, people begin to live inside emotional turbulence that they believe is caused by the world around them, when in reality, it is largely generated by the noise inside their own mind. The third force inside the mental noise prison is scattered attention. In the modern world, attention has become one of the most valuable resources in existence. Entire industries compete for it. Every application, advertisement, and notification is designed to capture and hold your focus for as long as possible. Over time, this environment trains the brain to constantly switch between stimuli. One moment you are reading something. The next moment, a notification pulls you away. Then, a new idea appears in your mind. Then, another distraction arrives. This constant switching weakens your ability to concentrate deeply. You sit down to read a book, but cannot focus for more than a few pages. You begin working on an important project, but find yourself checking messages within minutes. You try to listen carefully during a conversation, but feel the urge to glance at your phone. Your attention becomes fragmented, and fragmented attention produces fragmented results. Here is the devastating truth that most people never confront. Many individuals spend their entire lives inside this mental prison without ever realizing that a door exists. They assume anxiety is normal. They believe stress is unavoidable. They think constant mental activity is simply the price of living in a complex world. But this belief is incorrect. Some of the most effective and fulfilled individuals in the world have learned how to escape this prison. They have developed what psychologists call cognitive control, the ability to direct their attention deliberately instead of allowing it to be controlled by every passing stimulus. They can choose what to think about. They can focus their attention where it matters. They can remain calm under pressure because their minds are not constantly generating unnecessary noise. This ability is not a rare talent reserved for a few exceptional individuals. It is a trainable skill. Just like strengthening your body requires exercise, strengthening your mind requires practice. Every time you consciously redirect your attention, you weaken the patterns of mental noise and strengthen the circuits responsible for clarity. Over time, the prison walls begin to weaken. Thoughts still appear, but they no longer dominate your awareness. Emotions still arise, but they no longer control your behavior. Distractions still exist, but they lose their power to fragment your attention. The key to escaping the mental noise prison is not suppressing your thoughts. It is learning how to observe them without becoming trapped inside them. And once you begin developing this ability, something extraordinary begins to happen. You discover that the mind you once believed was chaotic and uncontrollable is actually capable of remarkable clarity. But to unlock that clarity, you must first understand something even deeper about how your brain truly works. Chapter 2. The Neuroscience of Mental Clarity. Your brain was not designed for the world you are living in today. For hundreds of thousands of years, the human brain evolved in an environment where survival depended on constant vigilance. Our ancestors faced immediate physical dangers: predators, harsh climates, limited food supplies, and unpredictable threats. In that world, the individuals who constantly scanned their surroundings, anticipated danger, and imagined worst-case scenarios had a better chance of surviving. The brain adapted accordingly. It developed systems designed to keep you alert, cautious, and prepared for potential threats at all times. From a survival perspective, this was incredibly effective. But in the modern world, where most threats are no longer physical, but psychological, this same survival machinery often works against us. To understand mental noise, you first need to understand one of the most important discoveries in modern neuroscience: the default mode network. The default mode network, often abbreviated as the DMN, is a network of interconnected brain regions that becomes active whenever your mind is not focused on a specific task. When you are not concentrating on something deliberate, your brain automatically shifts into this mode. And what does it do? It begins generating thoughts. Thoughts about the past, thoughts about the future, simulations of possible scenarios, memories, imagined conversations, worries, predictions. Even when you believe you are resting, the brain is still extremely active. In fact, the default mode network can consume nearly 20% of your body's total energy. This means that a significant portion of your daily energy is spent generating internal mental activity. Originally, this system helped humans survive. It allowed our ancestors to remember dangerous experiences, plan future actions, and imagine possible threats before they occurred. But in the modern world, this same system often becomes overactive. Instead of preparing you for real danger, it creates endless loops of rumination and worry about events that may never happen. The brain does not distinguish very well between imagined threats and real ones. When you replay a stressful memory or imagine a future problem, the brain activates many of the same stress responses that would occur during an actual physical threat. At the center of this response is a small but powerful structure in your brain called the amygdala. The amygdala functions as your internal alarm system. It constantly scans your environment for signals of danger. When it detects something it interprets as a threat, it triggers the body's stress response, releasing hormones, increasing heart rate, and preparing you for action. Thousands of years ago, this response helped humans escape predators or survive sudden danger. Today, however, the amygdala often reacts to situations that are not physically dangerous at all. A difficult email from a colleague can activate the same stress circuitry that once responded to a charging animal. A social media post that makes you feel inadequate can trigger the same emotional response as a real social rejection in ancient tribal environments. Your brain's threat detection system does not fully understand the difference. Meanwhile, another part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, is responsible for higher-order thinking. This region allows you to plan, reason, regulate emotions, and make thoughtful decisions. You could think of the prefrontal cortex as the executive leader of the brain. But when the amygdala is constantly sounding alarms, the prefrontal cortex struggles to do its job. Stress signals overpower rational thinking. Instead of responding thoughtfully, you react impulsively. This is why people often make poor decisions when they are overwhelmed or anxious. Their brain's security guard is shouting louder than the brain's strategist. However, there is an extraordinary piece of good news hidden within this system. Your brain is not fixed. It is constantly changing. Neuroscientists refer to this capacity as neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity means that the structure of your brain adapts based on how you use it. Every repeated pattern of thought strengthens certain neural pathways. Every new behavior creates new connections between neurons. The brain you have tomorrow will be slightly different from the brain you have today, shaped by the patterns you practice. This means that mental clarity is not something you are born with or without. It is something you train. Each time you practice focusing your attention, you strengthen the neural circuits responsible for concentration. Each time you observe a thought without immediately reacting to it, you strengthen the circuits responsible for self-awareness and emotional regulation. Over time, these changes become measurable. Research has shown that people who practice attention training techniques, such as mindfulness or focused awareness, for just 8 weeks, demonstrate measurable structural changes in the brain. Areas associated with emotional regulation and concentration become thicker and more active, while areas associated with stress and rumination become less reactive. In other words, the brain literally rewires itself toward clarity. But there is an important misunderstanding that often prevents people from developing this skill. Many individuals believe that developing a quiet mind means stopping thoughts entirely. They imagine that mental clarity means achieving a blank mind where no thoughts appear. When they attempt to practice stillness and thoughts continue to arise, they assume they are failing. But this assumption is incorrect. Thoughts are a natural function of the brain. Trying to eliminate them completely would be like trying to stop waves from forming in the ocean. The goal is not to eliminate thoughts. The goal is to change your relationship with them. Imagine holding a snow globe in your hands. When you shake it, tiny particles swirl chaotically throughout the water. The scene inside becomes cloudy and difficult to see, but when you place the snow globe down and allow it to settle, the particles slowly drift to the bottom. Clarity appears naturally. You did not force the particles to disappear. You simply stopped agitating them. The same principle applies to the mind. When you constantly stimulate the brain with distractions, worries, and reactions, the mental particles swirl endlessly. But when you begin training your attention and allowing the mind to settle, clarity emerges on its own. Neuroscientists have identified 3 key brain networks involved in developing this state. The first is the attention network. This system allows you to focus deliberately on a chosen object, whether it is a task, a conversation, or your own breathing. The second is the awareness network. This network allows you to observe thoughts and emotions as they arise without becoming overwhelmed by them. The third is the regulation network. This system allows you to guide your responses rather than reacting automatically. When these 3 networks work together, something remarkable happens. Your mind enters what psychologists call a state of flow. In flow, distractions fade away. Time feels different. Your attention becomes completely absorbed in what you are doing. Your actions feel effortless, yet powerful. Creativity increases. Performance improves. Flow is not a mystical experience reserved for rare moments. It is a natural brain state that emerges when mental noise decreases and attention becomes fully aligned with purposeful action. But reaching this state consistently requires more than simply understanding the brain. It requires training the psychological foundations that support a clear and resilient mind. And that is where the principles of positive psychology begin to transform your inner landscape. Chapter 3. The 5 Pillars of Positive Psychology. Positive psychology is often misunderstood. Many people assume it means forcing yourself to think positively, pretending everything is fine, or ignoring real problems in favor of artificial optimism. But that interpretation could not be further from the truth. Positive psychology is the scientific study of what makes life truly worth living. Instead of focusing only on mental illness or psychological dysfunction, researchers in this field ask a different question: what allows human beings to flourish? Over decades of research, psychologists have discovered that well-being, resilience, and peak performance are not random. They emerge from specific mental patterns and life conditions that can be cultivated intentionally. When these principles are combined with the development of a quiet mind, they become incredibly powerful. Mental clarity creates the internal space necessary for these principles to operate effectively. Without clarity, even the best psychological tools become difficult to apply because the mind is too noisy and reactive. Positive psychology identifies several key pillars that support human flourishing. When practiced consistently, these pillars transform the internal landscape of the mind and reshape how a person experiences life. The first pillar is gratitude, but not the shallow form of gratitude that most people practice. True gratitude is not simply saying thank you or listing a few things you appreciate at the end of the day. Genuine gratitude is a cognitive discipline that retrains the brain's attention system. The human brain naturally possesses what psychologists call a negativity bias. This bias developed because, in dangerous environments, noticing potential threats was more important for survival than appreciating pleasant experiences. Missing a danger could be fatal, while missing a pleasant moment rarely had serious consequences. As a result, the brain tends to focus more heavily on problems, threats, and negative experiences. In modern life, this bias can lead to unnecessary suffering. People often overlook the positive elements of their lives while becoming overly focused on what is missing or going wrong. Gratitude reverses this imbalance. When you intentionally train your attention to notice what is working in your life, small successes, meaningful relationships, simple comforts, you strengthen neural pathways associated with positive emotional states. Research by neuroscientists such as Dr. Alex Korb has shown that gratitude activates the brain's reward centers, increasing the release of dopamine and serotonin. These chemicals are associated with motivation, mood regulation, and emotional resilience. But gratitude does something even deeper than improving mood. It changes the lens through which you see reality. Instead of constantly scanning for problems, your brain becomes more sensitive to opportunities, support, and moments of beauty that were always present, but previously ignored. The second pillar is meaning and purpose. Human beings are not designed to function well without direction. When people feel that their lives are connected to something meaningful, something larger than immediate comfort or temporary pleasure, they experience greater motivation, resilience, and life satisfaction. Psychiatrist Viktor Frankl observed this phenomenon in some of the most extreme conditions imaginable. During his imprisonment in concentration camps during World War II, Frankl noticed that individuals who maintained a sense of purpose were more likely to survive psychological hardship. Purpose acts as a stabilizing force for the mind. When your mind is quiet enough to hear it, purpose becomes a compass, guiding your decisions and actions. It organizes your energy around meaningful goals, rather than allowing it to scatter across endless distractions. Mental noise often drowns out this deeper sense of direction. But when the mind becomes calm, the signals of what truly matters become easier to recognize. The third pillar is the growth mindset. Psychologist Carol Dweck introduced the concept of growth mindset to describe a fundamental difference in how people interpret challenges and failures. Individuals with a fixed mindset believe that intelligence and ability are largely static. When they encounter difficulty, they interpret it as evidence that they lack talent or competence. People with a growth mindset see challenges differently. They believe that abilities can develop through effort, learning, and persistence. Instead of interpreting setbacks as failure, they view them as feedback. This perspective dramatically changes how people approach difficulty. A quiet mind strengthens the growth mindset because it creates the mental space necessary to observe challenges without becoming overwhelmed by emotional reactions. When your mind is not flooded with fear or self-doubt, you can analyze situations more clearly, extract lessons, and adapt your strategies. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" you begin asking, "What can I learn from this experience?" The fourth pillar is connection and relationships. Human beings are fundamentally social creatures. Research consistently shows that the quality of our relationships is one of the strongest predictors of long-term happiness and life satisfaction. But meaningful connection requires presence. When your mind is filled with noise, worries about the future, regrets about the past, internal commentary about your own performance, it becomes difficult to truly listen to another person. Conversations become superficial because your attention is divided between the interaction and your internal thoughts. A quiet mind allows you to be fully present with others. Presence communicates something powerful that words alone cannot express. When someone feels genuinely seen and heard, trust deepens. Understanding increases. Relationships become more authentic and supportive. The fifth pillar is resilience. Life inevitably includes challenges, setbacks, and uncertainty. Resilience is the capacity to navigate these experiences without becoming permanently overwhelmed by them. Resilience does not mean suppressing emotions or pretending that difficulties do not exist. It means developing a stable internal core that remains steady even when external circumstances become chaotic. A quiet mind forms the foundation of this stability. When mental noise decreases, emotional reactions become easier to observe and regulate. Instead of being swept away by stress, you gain access to your problem-solving abilities and inner resources. You can pause, evaluate the situation clearly, and choose a response that aligns with your values and long-term goals. These 5 pillars, gratitude, purpose, growth mindset, relationships, and resilience, do not operate independently. They reinforce each other. Gratitude strengthens emotional stability. Purpose provides direction. A growth mindset encourages learning. Strong relationships offer support. Resilience allows you to continue moving forward despite difficulty. Together, they create what psychologists call flourishing. Flourishing is not simply the absence of suffering. It is the presence of vitality, engagement, and meaningful progress in life. But there is an important insight that many people overlook. These principles are much easier to practice when the mind is quiet. It is difficult to feel grateful when your thoughts are racing with worry. It is difficult to maintain purpose when your attention is constantly distracted. It is difficult to build strong relationships when your mind is elsewhere during conversations. Mental clarity creates the internal environment where these pillars can grow. Without that clarity, They struggle to take root. And yet, even when people understand the importance of developing a quiet mind and cultivating these psychological strengths, many still fail to make lasting progress, not because they lack ability, but because they fall into predictable mental traps that quietly pull them back into the cycle of noise and distraction. Understanding these traps is the next step in breaking free from them. Chapter 4. The 4 Mental Traps. Understanding the importance of a quiet mind is only the first step. Many people reach this point of awareness. They read about mental clarity, hear about mindfulness, or recognize that their attention has become fragmented. For a moment, they feel motivated to change. But then something happens. Despite their intentions, they slowly return to the same patterns of distraction, stress, and overthinking. The mind fills with noise again, and the clarity they hoped to develop begins to fade. This is not a failure of intelligence or discipline. It is the result of predictable psychological traps that quietly pull people back into mental chaos. These traps are subtle, and they are deeply reinforced by modern culture. Unless you recognize them clearly, they will continue operating beneath the surface of your behavior. The first trap is stimulation addiction. Your brain has become accustomed to constant stimulation. Every notification, video, article, and message delivers a small burst of novelty that briefly satisfies the mind's craving for input. This stimulation triggers the release of dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with anticipation and reward. Over time, the brain begins to expect this constant stream of stimulation. Silence becomes uncomfortable. Stillness feels unnatural. Moments without external input begin to produce restlessness. When nothing is happening, the brain quickly tries to create stimulation internally through thought. It generates worries, fantasies, or imagined conversations simply to avoid the feeling of boredom. Many people misinterpret this restlessness as a sign that they cannot quiet their minds. In reality, it is evidence that their minds have become dependent on stimulation. Breaking this addiction requires what can be called mental fasting. Just as the body benefits from occasional breaks from constant eating, the mind benefits from breaks from constant stimulation. But like any withdrawal process, the first stages can feel uncomfortable. When you begin spending short periods without external input, no phone, no music, no media, the mind initially becomes louder. Thoughts may appear rapidly, as if the brain is trying to fill the silence. This reaction is temporary. With practice, the mind begins to remember something it had forgotten: how to rest. The second trap is perfectionist paralysis. Many people believe they need ideal conditions in order to develop a quiet mind. They imagine that mental clarity requires a perfectly silent room, a special meditation cushion, a long block of uninterrupted time, or a complete absence of distractions. Because these perfect conditions rarely exist in real life, they postpone the practice. They tell themselves they will begin when their schedule becomes less busy, when their environment becomes calmer, when they feel more prepared. But the perfect moment never arrives. The truth is that mental clarity does not depend on perfect external conditions. It depends on developing internal stability that remains steady, even when the environment is imperfect. Some of the most valuable moments of mental training occur in the middle of everyday life, while waiting in line, commuting, or facing stressful situations. Instead of avoiding imperfect conditions, you learn to use them as opportunities to strengthen your mental stability. Every distraction becomes training. Every challenge becomes practice. The third trap is emotional resistance. When people begin quieting their minds, something unexpected often happens. Suppressed emotions begin to surface. For many individuals, Mental noise serves as a distraction from feelings they have avoided for a long time. The constant thinking, scrolling, and stimulation prevent deeper emotional experiences from reaching awareness. But when the mind becomes quieter, those buried emotions finally have space to emerge. Old frustrations, unprocessed sadness, lingering anxiety. At first, this can feel uncomfortable. Some people interpret these emotions as signs that something is going wrong with their practice. In reality, the opposite is happening. The emotional system is beginning to release what it has been holding. Just as the body detoxifies when unhealthy substances are removed, the mind processes stored emotional experiences when constant mental noise decreases. The key is not to fight these emotions or drown in them. You simply allow them to exist. You observe them with curiosity rather than judgment. Over time, this process leads to emotional freedom. Feelings that once seemed overwhelming gradually lose their intensity when they are acknowledged rather than suppressed. The fourth trap is the expectation of instant results. Modern culture has conditioned people to expect immediate outcomes. Information arrives instantly. Messages are delivered instantly. Entertainment is available instantly. Because of this environment, many individuals unconsciously expect personal transformation to occur just as quickly. They practice mental training for a few days or weeks. When dramatic results do not appear immediately, they assume the practice is not working. But developing a quiet mind is similar to strengthening the body. You do not become physically strong after 2 visits to the gym. You become strong through consistent training over time. The same principle applies to the mind. At first, the changes may be subtle. Your attention may improve slightly. Your reactions may become a little slower. Moments of calm may appear briefly throughout the day. These small shifts accumulate. Over weeks and months, they begin to reshape how you experience life. Stress decreases. Focus becomes stronger. Emotional reactions become less overwhelming. But these changes occur gradually. The individuals who successfully develop a quiet mind are not those who expect immediate transformation. They are the ones who commit to the process, regardless of how they feel in the moment. They focus on consistency rather than results. They understand that every moment of practice strengthens the neural pathways of clarity and weakens the patterns of mental noise. Over time, the cumulative effect becomes powerful. Recognizing these traps does not mean they will disappear completely. They will still appear occasionally. Your mind will still seek stimulation. You may still wait for ideal conditions or feel discouraged when progress seems slow. But awareness changes your relationship with these patterns. Instead of unconsciously falling into them, you begin to recognize them as temporary obstacles on the path of mental development. Every time you notice a trap and choose a different response, you strengthen your ability to guide your mind rather than be controlled by it. And as these traps lose their influence, you begin building something far more powerful. A mental structure that supports clarity every day. A daily architecture that stabilizes the mind, regardless of external circumstances. Chapter 5. Daily Architecture of a Quiet Mind. Developing a quiet mind is not something you do occasionally when you remember to practice. It is not a technique you apply only when you feel stressed or overwhelmed. True mental clarity emerges when the structure of your daily life supports it consistently. Think of your mind as a living system. Just as a building requires a stable architecture to remain standing, your mental state depends on the habits, routines, and environments you create around it. Without structure, even the strongest intentions eventually collapse under the pressure of daily distractions. Many people approach mental training the same way they approach exercise. They set aside a short period of time, perhaps 10 or 20 minutes, to meditate or reflect. Afterward, they return to the rest of their day exactly as before, surrounded by constant stimulation, rushing through tasks, and reacting to every interruption. The result is predictable. The small period of clarity they experience during practice quickly dissolves once the noise of daily life returns. To truly develop a quiet mind, mental clarity must be woven into the fabric of your day. It must become part of how you wake up, how you move through your tasks, how you interact with others, and how you end your evening. This begins with what can be called anchor moments. Anchor moments are specific points throughout your day when you intentionally reconnect with awareness and presence. They serve as mental reset points that stabilize your attention before it drifts too far into distraction. Your first anchor moment happens before you even leave your bed. Most people begin their day by immediately reaching for their phone. They check messages, scroll through news, or begin mentally planning their responsibilities. Within seconds, their nervous system is already reacting to external demands. Instead, begin with a brief pause. Before getting up, take 2 or 3 minutes to simply notice your breathing. Feel the rhythm of inhaling and exhaling. Allow your mind to settle before engaging with the outside world. This simple pause signals to your nervous system that the day will begin with intention rather than reaction. You do not need long periods of silence for this practice to be effective. Even a few minutes of calm attention at the beginning of the day can significantly influence the mental tone that follows. The second anchor moment occurs during your morning routine. Choose one ordinary activity, showering, drinking coffee, or preparing breakfast, and perform it with full attention. Notice the physical sensations involved. Feel the temperature of the water. Taste the flavor of your drink. Observe the small details of the moment. This practice trains your brain to experience presence in everyday actions, rather than constantly seeking stimulation from outside sources. Presence is not something reserved for meditation sessions. It is a skill that can be practiced during ordinary life. As your day continues, introduce small micro-anchor moments throughout your work and responsibilities. Before checking your email, pause for one deep breath. Before entering a meeting or starting a conversation, take a moment to center yourself. Feel your body, notice your breathing, and bring your attention fully into the present. These pauses may last only a few seconds, but they interrupt the automatic momentum of distraction. They create small spaces where conscious choice becomes possible. Over time, these brief moments accumulate. They gradually shift your baseline mental state from constant reactivity to steady awareness. Another essential component of daily mental architecture is response flexibility. In everyday life, situations constantly arise that trigger emotional reactions. A stressful message arrives. Someone criticizes your work. An unexpected obstacle disrupts your plans. In the absence of mental training, reactions occur automatically. Anger leads to immediate responses. Stress leads to impulsive decisions. Frustration leads to scattered thinking. But a quiet mind introduces a small but powerful gap between stimulus and response. In that gap, you gain the ability to choose how you will act. This skill can be strengthened using a simple process often described as the stop technique. When you notice stress or emotional intensity rising, mentally say the word stop. Take one slow breath. Observe what is happening without immediately reacting to it. Notice the thoughts forming in your mind. Notice the physical sensations in your body. Then proceed deliberately rather than impulsively. This brief interruption gives the rational parts of the brain time to engage before emotional reactions take control. Another critical element of maintaining mental clarity is what can be called your information diet. Just as food influences the health of your body, information influences the health of your mind. Most people consume information continuously throughout the day, without any conscious filtering. They move from news headlines to social media, to email, to entertainment, without considering the cumulative psychological impact. Much of this information is designed to provoke emotional reactions, fear, outrage, comparison, or urgency, because emotionally charged content captures attention more effectively. A quiet mind requires intentional boundaries around information consumption. This does not mean avoiding information entirely. It means deciding when and how you engage with it. Instead of checking news or social media repeatedly throughout the day, choose specific times when you will engage with those platforms. Select sources that inform rather than inflame. Limit exposure to content that triggers anxiety without providing meaningful value. Finally, your daily mental architecture must include an evening integration practice. Before going to sleep, spend a few minutes reflecting on your day. Review your experiences with curiosity rather than judgment. Ask yourself simple questions. What went well today? What did I learn? Where did I respond with clarity? And where did I react automatically? This reflection allows your mind to process the experiences of the day instead of carrying unresolved mental tension into the night. It also prepares your subconscious mind to continue integrating those lessons while you sleep. Over time, these small practices reshape your mental environment. Mental clarity stops being something you occasionally experience and begins becoming your natural baseline state. Instead of relying on motivation or willpower, you build systems that support the state of mind you want to cultivate. And as this architecture strengthens, something important begins to happen. You discover that the calm you have been practicing during quiet moments can also appear during moments of pressure. Chapter 6. Mental Clarity Under Pressure. Maintaining a quiet mind when life is calm is relatively easy. When there are no urgent problems, no deadlines, no emotional conflicts, clarity can arise naturally. But the true test of mental mastery appears when pressure increases, when deadlines tighten, when relationships become tense, when uncertainty appears. Most people feel their mental training disappear. The mind becomes noisy again. Thoughts accelerate. Emotions intensify. Decision-making becomes reactive rather than deliberate. Yet some individuals respond differently. Instead of becoming overwhelmed during stressful moments, they become even more focused. Their thinking sharpens. Their emotional responses stabilize. While others panic, they remain calm enough to see solutions. The difference between these two responses is not talent or personality. It is training. One of the most powerful methods for strengthening mental clarity under pressure is what can be called pressure immunization. Just as vaccines expose the body to small doses of a virus to build resistance, pressure immunization exposes the mind to small amounts of stress while practicing calm awareness. Most people only try to practice mental clarity when conditions are already peaceful. They sit quietly, breathe slowly, and focus when nothing difficult is happening. But then real stress appears, and their practice disappears. Pressure immunization reverses this pattern. You begin practicing mental clarity during minor challenges. When you are stuck in traffic, instead of allowing frustration to dominate your thoughts, you observe the emotion and return your attention to the present moment. When someone interrupts your plans, you notice the impulse to react and pause before responding. Each small moment becomes training. As your ability grows, you gradually apply the same awareness to more demanding situations. Important meetings, difficult conversations, unexpected problems. Over time, the nervous system learns that stress does not require panic. It can coexist with clarity. Another powerful technique for maintaining mental clarity under pressure is cognitive reframing. When the brain detects a stressful situation, it naturally begins generating worst-case scenarios. Thoughts like, "This is going to fail," "I cannot handle this," or "Everything is falling apart," appear quickly. These interpretations amplify emotional stress and narrow your perception. Cognitive reframing involves deliberately choosing a different interpretation of the same situation. Instead of thinking, "This is a disaster," you might ask, "What opportunity does this challenge contain?" Instead of thinking, "I cannot handle this," you might consider, "This situation is expanding my capacity." Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What can this experience teach me?" These reframed perspectives do not deny reality. They redirect your mental energy toward constructive action rather than helpless reaction. Your brain responds differently when it interprets stress as a challenge rather than a threat. Another critical skill during stressful situations is attentional control. When pressure rises, the mind often begins thinking about too many things at once. Deadlines, potential mistakes, future consequences, and external opinions compete for attention simultaneously. This fragmentation weakens decision-making. To restore clarity, you can ask 3 simple questions that refocus attention immediately. What is the most important thing right now? What part of this situation can I actually control? What would the wisest version of myself do in this moment? These questions cut through mental noise. They shift attention from abstract worry toward concrete action. Another powerful method for working with intense emotional states is emotional surfing. Many people attempt to suppress emotions when they arise. They try to push anxiety away or ignore frustration. Others do the opposite. They become completely absorbed by the emotion and react impulsively. Emotional surfing offers a third option. Instead of resisting or drowning in the emotion, you allow yourself to ride its energy. Imagine a surfer approaching a powerful wave. The surfer does not attempt to stop the wave or escape from it. Instead, they position themselves skillfully and use the energy of the wave to move forward. Emotions work the same way. Anxiety contains energy that can become focus. Anger contains energy that can become determination. Fear contains energy that can sharpen awareness. When you observe emotions with a quiet mind, you gain the ability to redirect their energy toward productive action. For example, if you feel anxious about an important deadline, that anxiety can become intense concentration that helps you complete the task effectively. If you feel frustrated by an obstacle, that frustration can fuel creative problem solving. Another essential skill during high-pressure situations is systems thinking. When people face complex challenges, they often try to solve everything at once. The mind becomes overwhelmed by the number of variables involved. Systems thinking simplifies complexity. You break the situation into categories. What aspects are urgent and require immediate attention? What aspects are important but not urgent? What elements are within your control? What elements are outside your control? By separating these categories, the mind regains clarity. You focus first on the actions that matter most, while releasing mental energy wasted on factors you cannot influence. In addition to mental strategies, maintaining clarity during pressure requires managing energy. When people experience prolonged stress, they often remain in a constant state of alertness. They attempt to push through fatigue without allowing the mind to recover. This strategy eventually backfires. The brain functions best when periods of intense focus are balanced with brief periods of recovery. Even during demanding situations, small breaks can restore clarity. A short walk, a few deep breaths, closing your eyes for a moment and reconnecting with your breath. These micro-recoveries allow the nervous system to reset, preventing mental exhaustion from accumulating. Finally, advanced practitioners develop what can be called a clarity anchor. A clarity anchor is a simple mental or physical action that immediately reconnects you with calm awareness. It could be a specific breathing pattern, a phrase you repeat silently, a brief visualization that reminds you of your deeper purpose. The key is repetition. By practicing this anchor regularly during calm moments, your brain begins associating it with mental clarity. Eventually, activating the anchor during stressful situations triggers the same calm state automatically. With time, these techniques transform how you experience pressure. Instead of fearing difficult situations, you begin seeing them as opportunities to strengthen your mental stability. While others become overwhelmed, your mind becomes clearer. While others panic, your thinking becomes sharper. And as your ability to remain calm under pressure increases, you begin unlocking a powerful psychological force that further amplifies clarity and resilience. That force is gratitude. Chapter 7. The Gratitude Revolution. Gratitude is one of the most powerful psychological tools available to the human mind, yet it is also one of the most misunderstood. Many people treat gratitude as a simple emotional exercise. They occasionally remind themselves to be thankful for a few things in their lives: family, health, opportunities, and assume that this brief reflection is enough. While this kind of gratitude is certainly beneficial, it barely scratches the surface of what gratitude can actually do. True gratitude is not merely a feeling. It is a cognitive technology that retrains how the brain interprets reality. At the neurological level, gratitude activates powerful chemical processes in the brain. When you experience genuine appreciation, your brain releases dopamine and serotonin, two neurotransmitters associated with motivation, emotional stability, and overall well-being. These chemicals are the same ones targeted by many antidepressant medications. But unlike medication, gratitude produces lasting structural changes in the brain. Research led by psychologists, such as Dr. Robert Emmons, has shown that individuals who practice gratitude consistently experience measurable improvements in mood, sleep quality, physical health, and social relationships. They also demonstrate greater resilience when facing challenges and recover from stress more quickly. However, the most profound effect of gratitude lies in how it changes your attention. The human brain constantly filters enormous amounts of information. At any moment, your senses are receiving far more signals than your conscious mind can process. To manage this overload, the brain selects what it considers most important. If your mind is trained to focus primarily on problems and threats, that is what you will notice most often. Even in situations filled with opportunity and support, your attention will gravitate toward what feels lacking or uncertain. Gratitude alters this filter. By intentionally directing your attention toward what is working in your life, you gradually retrain your brain to notice positive elements that previously remained invisible. This shift is subtle, but transformative. Instead of seeing a world dominated by obstacles, you begin seeing a world filled with resources, possibilities, and support. But there is an important distinction between surface gratitude and deep gratitude. Surface gratitude involves acknowledging obvious blessings: health, family, shelter, or opportunities. While valuable, this type of appreciation often becomes repetitive and mechanical if practiced without deeper awareness. Deep gratitude requires a more refined perspective. It begins by appreciating ordinary experiences that most people overlook. Consider something as simple as reading these words. The ability to see them requires an intricate coordination of sensory systems, neural processing, and cognitive interpretation, happening within fractions of a second. Your visual system processes millions of signals. Your brain recognizes patterns of language. Memory retrieves meanings associated with each word. All of this occurs effortlessly, yet most people rarely pause to appreciate this extraordinary capability. The same is true for countless other aspects of daily life. The ability to walk, breathe, taste food, communicate with others, or rest safely at night represents an extraordinary combination of biological processes and environmental conditions. When you begin noticing these ordinary miracles, something remarkable happens. Your baseline level of appreciation increases. Life stops feeling routine and begins feeling extraordinary. But deep gratitude does not stop with appreciating pleasant experiences. It also extends to challenges. At first, this idea may seem counterintuitive. Difficult situations are not inherently enjoyable. They can involve frustration, disappointment, or loss. However, challenges often contain valuable opportunities for growth. Every obstacle you have overcome has strengthened your resilience. Every mistake has taught you something that improved your judgment. Every difficult person has revealed aspects of your own boundaries, patience, or communication skills. Deep gratitude does not pretend that hardship is pleasant. Instead, it recognizes that growth often emerges from difficulty. When you begin extracting value from challenging experiences, adversity loses much of its power to discourage you. Problems become training rather than punishment. Another powerful dimension of gratitude is anticipatory gratitude. Most people wait until something positive happens before allowing themselves to feel appreciation. They achieve a goal, receive recognition, or overcome a problem, and only then do they experience gratitude. Anticipatory gratitude reverses this sequence. Instead of waiting for positive outcomes to appear, you cultivate appreciation for the opportunities that exist before the results have arrived. You feel grateful for the chance to pursue meaningful goals. You appreciate the possibility of learning new skills. You recognize the potential within your circumstances before it fully unfolds. This practice influences behavior in subtle but powerful ways. When you approach opportunities with gratitude rather than anxiety, your mind becomes more open and creative. You are more likely to recognize possibilities that others overlook. Your actions become guided by curiosity rather than fear. Another advanced gratitude technique can be described as appreciation mining. Appreciation mining involves searching for valuable aspects within situations that initially appear negative. When you are stuck in traffic, you can use the time to reflect, listen to educational material, or practice patience. When you encounter a difficult colleague, the interaction becomes an opportunity to strengthen emotional regulation and communication skills. This perspective does not ignore problems. It transforms them into sources of growth. Over time, appreciation mining trains the mind to remain constructive regardless of external conditions. Instead of waiting for perfect circumstances, you learn to extract value from whatever situation you encounter. To develop these capacities, gratitude must become part of your daily mental architecture. In the morning, identify several aspects of the coming day that you appreciate. Opportunities to learn, people you will interact with, or experiences you anticipate. Throughout the day, notice small moments of comfort, beauty, or kindness that might otherwise pass unnoticed. In the evening, reflect on the events of the day and acknowledge both the successes and the lessons they contained. These practices may appear simple, but their cumulative effect is powerful. Over time, gratitude becomes more than an occasional emotion. It becomes a mindset. Your default mental orientation shifts from scanning for threats to recognizing possibilities, from noticing what is missing to appreciating what is present. And when this appreciative mindset combines with the clarity of a quiet mind, something extraordinary begins to happen. You become more capable of entering one of the most powerful mental states available to human beings, the state known as flow. Chapter 8. Flow States and Peak Performance. There are moments in life when everything seems to work effortlessly. Your mind becomes intensely focused, distractions fade away, and the activity you are engaged in feels almost automatic. Hours pass without you noticing. Your actions feel fluid and precise. Ideas appear naturally, and performance reaches a level that surprises even you. Athletes call this state being in the zone. Artists call it inspiration. Entrepreneurs often describe it as being on fire. Psychologists call it flow. Flow is the natural expression of a quiet mind in action. It represents the point where mental clarity, focused attention, and purposeful activity align perfectly. In this state, the mind is neither restless nor distracted. Instead, it is completely absorbed in the present moment. The concept of flow was studied extensively by psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who spent decades researching high performers across a wide range of disciplines. Athletes, musicians, scientists, business leaders, and creative professionals. Despite their differences, these individuals described remarkably similar mental experiences during their most productive and satisfying moments. They reported complete concentration on the task at hand. They experienced clear goals and immediate feedback from their actions. Their awareness merged with the activity itself, eliminating self-conscious thinking. And perhaps most importantly, they felt deeply motivated by the experience itself rather than by external rewards. Flow is not random. It emerges when certain psychological conditions are present. The first of these conditions is the balance between challenge and skill. When a task is too easy, the mind becomes bored. Attention drifts because the brain does not need to fully engage its abilities. On the other hand, when a task is too difficult, the mind becomes anxious or overwhelmed. Flow exists between these extremes. It appears when a task is challenging enough to demand your full attention, but not so difficult that it feels impossible. A quiet mind plays an essential role in maintaining this balance. When mental noise is high, your perception becomes distorted. Simple tasks may appear overwhelming because your mind is already occupied with worry or distraction. But when your mind is clear, you can assess situations more accurately. You can recognize when a challenge requires more effort and when your skills are sufficient to meet it. This clarity allows you to position yourself in the zone where flow is most likely to occur. The second condition for flow is the presence of clear goals and immediate feedback. The brain functions best when it knows exactly what it is trying to accomplish. Vague objectives create confusion and reduce motivation. But when the goal is specific, your attention naturally organizes itself around the actions required to achieve it. Immediate feedback strengthens this process. In many activities, sports, music, creative work, or problem solving, you receive continuous signals about whether your actions are effective. Each adjustment leads to new feedback, guiding your next move. This cycle creates a powerful loop of engagement. Your brain remains fully focused because it is constantly learning and adapting. The third condition for flow is deep concentration on the present moment. Flow cannot exist when your attention is divided between past regrets, future worries, and the task in front of you. It requires the ability to sustain focus without being pulled away by distractions. This is where the development of a quiet mind becomes crucial. Most people struggle to maintain attention because their minds continuously generate internal commentary. Even while working, they may think about how well they are performing, what others might think of their work, or whether they will succeed in the future. These thoughts fragment attention and prevent full immersion in the task. But when mental noise decreases, attention becomes more stable. The mind stops evaluating every action and instead allows the activity itself to guide awareness. In flow, you are not thinking about performing. You are performing. The fourth condition is the temporary disappearance of self-consciousness. During ordinary activities, people often monitor themselves constantly. They wonder whether they look competent, whether others are judging them, or whether their performance is good enough. This self-monitoring consumes enormous mental energy. Flow removes it. The internal critic becomes quiet. The mind stops analyzing how you appear and instead focuses entirely on what you are doing. Ironically, this loss of self-consciousness often leads to higher levels of performance. Without the distraction of self-judgment, your brain can access deeper layers of skill and creativity. Neuroscientists have observed that during flow states, activity in parts of the prefrontal cortex temporarily decreases. This phenomenon, sometimes called transient hypofrontality, reduces the mental processes responsible for self-doubt and overthinking. As a result, actions become more fluid and intuitive. The fifth condition is intrinsic motivation. Flow occurs most naturally when you engage in activities that are meaningful or enjoyable in themselves. If you perform a task only for external rewards, money, status, or approval, your attention may become divided between the activity and the outcome. Intrinsic motivation eliminates this division. When the activity itself becomes rewarding, your mind naturally stays engaged. This is one reason why individuals who regularly experience flow often design their lives around activities that align with their interests, strengths, and values. They seek challenges that stimulate growth while allowing them to express their abilities fully. But flow does not have to be limited to specialized activities. Even ordinary tasks can become opportunities for flow when approached with the right mindset. Washing dishes can become a meditative experience when you focus fully on the sensory details. The warmth of the water, the rhythm of movement, the simple satisfaction of completing each action. Walking can become deeply absorbing when you pay attention to your breathing, the movement of your body, and the environment around you. Routine work tasks can become engaging when you set clear objectives, eliminate distractions, and concentrate fully on each step of the process. In this way, flow becomes not just an occasional peak experience, but a regular feature of daily life. The benefits of flow extend far beyond performance. People who experience flow regularly report higher levels of life satisfaction, deeper engagement with their work, and stronger emotional well-being. They often describe feeling more alive because their attention is consistently connected to meaningful activity. Flow represents a powerful integration of quiet mind and purposeful action. It demonstrates that mental clarity is not only about inner peace. It is also about unlocking your highest potential. But even individuals who regularly enter flow states will encounter moments when progress slows or difficulties arise. Challenges, setbacks, and periods of doubt are inevitable parts of growth. The question is not whether these obstacles will appear. The question is how you respond when they do. Chapter 9. overcoming setbacks and the psychology of resilience. The journey toward a quiet mind is not a straight line. Many people begin with enthusiasm and experience early improvements. Their stress decreases. Their focus becomes stronger. They feel more present in their daily lives. For a while, everything seems to move forward smoothly. Then something changes. Old patterns suddenly return. The mind becomes noisy again. Emotional reactions intensify. Doubt begins to appear. Many people interpret these moments as failure. They assume they are doing something wrong, or that the practice simply does not work for them. But these setbacks are not signs of failure. They are natural stages in the process of mental transformation. Understanding these stages is essential for developing true resilience. Without this understanding, people often abandon the path of mental clarity just when their minds are beginning to change. One of the most common setbacks is what can be called the honeymoon crash. When individuals first begin practicing mental clarity techniques, they often experience rapid improvements. The mind becomes calmer, attention becomes stronger, and emotional reactions become easier to manage. This early progress creates excitement. However, after several weeks or months, many people experience an unexpected plateau. The improvements slow down, and in some cases they appear to reverse. Suddenly, the mind feels restless again. Old habits resurface. This phase can be discouraging if you do not understand what is happening. But the honeymoon crash is actually evidence that deeper change is occurring. Your brain is reorganizing itself. New neural pathways are forming, while old ones are weakening. During this process, the mind may temporarily feel unstable. It is similar to renovating a building. When walls are removed and structures are rebuilt, the environment may appear messy before the final structure becomes stronger. If you continue practicing during this phase, the brain eventually stabilizes around the new patterns. But if you stop practicing, the old patterns regain their dominance. Another common setback is triggered regression. Life inevitably brings periods of intense stress, financial pressure, relationship conflict, health challenges, or unexpected loss. During these moments, even individuals with strong mental training may find themselves slipping back into old habits of worry, overthinking, or emotional reactivity. This regression can feel frustrating, especially after months or years of progress. But regression during extreme circumstances is normal. Your nervous system is responding to powerful stimuli, and temporary disruption is part of the human experience. The key difference between trained and untrained minds is recovery time. Without mental training, people may remain trapped in reactive patterns for weeks or months. With training, the mind often returns to stability much more quickly, sometimes within hours or days. Progress is not defined by never falling. It is defined by how quickly you rise again. Another challenge that appears over time is motivational fatigue. When people first begin practicing mental clarity techniques, the experience often feels exciting and new. Each improvement feels rewarding, but after months of practice, the techniques may begin to feel routine. The benefits that once seemed remarkable become familiar. The mind may start wondering whether continuing the practice is necessary. This fatigue is not a sign that the practice has lost its value. It is a sign that the practice must evolve. Just as athletes adjust their training as their strength improves, mental training must expand to remain engaging. This may involve exploring new techniques, deepening your understanding of existing practices, or applying mental clarity skills to more complex areas of life. Growth requires continuous adaptation. Another challenge many people encounter is social resistance. As you develop greater mental clarity and emotional stability. The changes in your behavior may affect the dynamics of your relationships. Some individuals may support your growth. Others may feel uncomfortable with the changes. People who are accustomed to reacting emotionally may feel challenged by someone who remains calm. Those who rely on shared complaints or negativity may feel uneasy when you stop participating in those patterns. This resistance can create doubt. You may wonder whether your personal development is creating distance between you and others. But this reaction is a natural consequence of change. When you transform internally, the patterns of interaction around you must also adjust. Some relationships may strengthen as mutual understanding grows. Others may require new boundaries. Your responsibility is not to force others to change. Your responsibility is to remain committed to your own growth while maintaining compassion for those who are still navigating their own paths. One of the most powerful frameworks for navigating setbacks is the concept of anti-fragility. Anti-fragile systems do more than simply survive stress. They grow stronger because of it. Muscles become stronger when they encounter resistance. Immune systems become more resilient when exposed to small challenges. Similarly, the mind becomes stronger when it learns to navigate difficulty with awareness. Each setback contains valuable information. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen?" you begin asking, "What can this teach me?" This perspective transforms obstacles into opportunities for refinement. A practical method for navigating setbacks is what can be called the RISE protocol. First, recognize the setback without judgment. Acknowledge what is happening instead of criticizing yourself. Second, investigate the situation. Identify the triggers, patterns, or conditions that contributed to the setback. Third, strategize a response. Decide what adjustments you need to make in your habits, environment, or mindset. Finally, execute your strategy with patience. Recovery is rarely instantaneous, but with consistent effort, progress resumes. Another important element of resilience is maintaining perspective. When you are inside a difficult moment, it can feel permanent. Emotions may convince you that the struggle will last forever. But if you observe your life over longer periods, you will notice that most difficulties pass. Situations change. New opportunities appear. Keeping a record of your experiences, through journaling or reflection, can help you recognize patterns of growth that are difficult to see in the moment. Perhaps the most important component of resilience is self-compassion. Many people respond to setbacks with harsh self-criticism. They tell themselves they are weak, incapable, or undisciplined. This internal criticism creates additional stress and makes recovery more difficult. Imagine how you would respond if a close friend were facing a similar challenge. You would likely offer understanding, encouragement, and support. Self-compassion means offering the same attitude to yourself. You acknowledge your difficulties without exaggerating them. You recognize that struggle is part of the human experience, and you continue moving forward with patience rather than judgment. Ultimately, setbacks are not interruptions in the journey toward mental clarity. They are part of the journey itself. Each obstacle strengthens your ability to remain calm under pressure, adapt to changing circumstances, and continue growing. And as resilience deepens, something remarkable begins to emerge. Mental clarity evolves from a temporary state into a stable foundation for life itself. Chapter 10. Building Long-Term Mental Mastery. Developing a quiet mind is not a destination that you reach once and then maintain effortlessly for the rest of your life. It is a process of continual refinement. Just as the body requires ongoing movement to remain strong, The mind requires ongoing awareness to remain clear. Many people begin their journey toward mental clarity because they want to solve a specific problem. They want less anxiety. They want better focus. They want to stop overthinking or improve their emotional stability. These motivations are valid and often serve as the starting point of personal transformation. But over time, something deeper begins to happen. The goal shifts. Instead of practicing mental clarity only when something feels wrong, you begin practicing because you are curious about your own potential. You become interested in how deeply your mind can evolve, how much clarity it can hold, and how powerfully it can influence your life. This shift represents the transition from problem-focused practice to growth-focused practice. In problem-focused practice, techniques are used to fix difficulties. Once the difficulty disappears, the motivation to practice often fades as well. In growth-focused practice, the goal is expansion. You practice not because something is broken, but because you want to explore how far your awareness can develop. This perspective changes everything. Instead of waiting for stress before returning to your practice, you maintain your mental training consistently. Instead of seeing techniques as temporary tools, you begin integrating them into the way you live. Another important transition occurs as mental clarity deepens. In the early stages, most people focus primarily on their own experience. They want to feel calmer, think more clearly, and improve their personal outcomes. But as awareness grows, the focus often expands beyond the self. You begin noticing how your mental state influences others. When your mind is calm, conversations become more thoughtful. Conflicts become easier to resolve. Your presence can reduce tension in a room simply because you are not adding emotional noise to the situation. Mental clarity begins affecting not only your life, but the lives of the people around you. This shift transforms personal development into something larger. Your practice becomes an act of contribution. When you cultivate emotional stability, your family benefits. When you develop clearer thinking, your work improves. When you respond to challenges with patience instead of reaction, your community experiences greater harmony. Your internal development creates external influence. This influence does not require authority or recognition. It emerges naturally through presence. Another stage of development involves moving from technique-focused practice to principle-focused awareness. In the beginning, specific techniques are essential. Structured exercises, breathing practices, gratitude reflections, attention training help the mind develop basic skills. But as these skills strengthen, the underlying principles become more important than the techniques themselves. You begin recognizing patterns. You notice when your attention is drifting. You feel when emotions are beginning to dominate your thinking. Instead of relying on a specific exercise to restore balance, you apply the principle of awareness directly in the moment. Clarity becomes less dependent on controlled environments and more integrated into everyday situations. Over time, this integration leads to a progression psychologists describe as the competence hierarchy. At first, you are unconsciously incompetent. You do not realize how scattered your attention is or how reactive your thinking has become. Then, you become consciously incompetent. You recognize the problem and begin learning techniques to address it. With practice, you become consciously competent. You can access clarity when you remember to apply your training. Finally, with continued development, you reach unconscious competence. Mental clarity becomes your natural state. You do not need to remind yourself to remain present. Awareness arises automatically. Emotional stability becomes instinctive. Your responses reflect deliberate choice rather than automatic reaction. Reaching this stage does not mean that thoughts disappear or challenges stop appearing. It means that your relationship with those experiences changes. Your mind becomes stable enough to observe thoughts without being controlled by them. Emotions can arise without overwhelming your behavior. This stability allows you to engage with life more effectively. Another important element of long-term mastery is practice evolution. Just as physical training must evolve to remain effective, mental training must also adapt. Techniques that were challenging in the beginning may eventually become routine. To continue growing, you introduce new challenges. You practice maintaining clarity in more demanding environments. You explore deeper layers of emotional awareness. You refine your ability to notice subtle mental patterns before they influence behavior. Each stage of development reveals new opportunities for growth. As your awareness expands, you also begin noticing the influence of your mental state on the broader environment. A calm mind tends to create calm environments. A reactive mind tends to spread tension. Because human beings are highly sensitive to emotional signals, your presence influences the psychological atmosphere around you. Individuals who develop stable mental clarity often become what could be described as peaceful leaders. They may not hold formal positions of authority, yet others naturally gravitate toward them for guidance or stability. Their ability to remain calm during uncertainty inspires trust. Their clarity during confusion helps others see solutions. This form of leadership is subtle but powerful. It emerges not from control, but from consistency. The ripple effects of mental mastery extend further than most people realize. A parent who practices emotional regulation helps children develop security and resilience. A colleague who responds thoughtfully instead of reactively improves the culture of a workplace. A friend who listens with presence deepens the quality of relationships. Each of these interactions influences the larger social environment. For this reason, mental clarity is not only a personal achievement, it is a contribution to collective well-being. But reaching this level of mastery requires understanding another essential dimension of human experience. Thoughts influence the mind, but emotions influence behavior. To fully develop mental mastery, you must also learn how to understand and transform the emotional forces that shape your actions. Chapter 11. The Science of Emotional Mastery. Most people believe they are controlled by their emotions. They feel anxious, so they avoid the situation that triggers the anxiety. They feel angry, so they react immediately and say things they later regret. They feel discouraged, so they withdraw from effort and abandon their goals. From the outside, these reactions seem automatic. But emotional reactivity is not a fixed part of human nature. It is largely the result of training or the absence of training. Just as the body can be conditioned to respond differently to physical stress, the emotional system can be trained to respond differently to psychological challenges. Emotional mastery does not mean eliminating feelings. It means learning how to experience emotions fully without becoming controlled by them. A quiet mind creates the space necessary for this skill to develop. When mental noise dominates your attention, emotions move too quickly to observe clearly. Thoughts amplify the feeling, stories form around it, and the reaction happens almost instantly. But when your mind is quiet and attentive, something important becomes possible. You can see the emotion before you react to it. This moment of awareness changes everything. The first principle of emotional mastery is understanding that emotions are information. Every emotion your nervous system produces carries a message about your experience. Anger often signals that a boundary has been crossed. Fear signals potential risk. or uncertainty. Sadness indicates that something meaningful has been lost or changed. Joy signals alignment with something valuable to you. Most people ignore this information. Instead of listening to the message within the emotion, they either suppress the feeling or act on it impulsively. Suppression traps emotional energy inside the body. Impulsive reaction releases that energy in ways that often create additional problems. Emotional mastery begins when you learn to pause and listen. When a strong emotion arises, you ask yourself a simple question. What is this feeling trying to tell me? This shift transforms emotions from obstacles into guides. The second principle is emotional granularity. Many people describe their emotional state in very general terms. They say they feel bad, stressed, or fine. But these labels are vague. Emotional granularity refers to the ability to distinguish between specific emotional experiences with precision. Instead of simply feeling bad, you might recognize that you feel disappointed, frustrated, uncertain, or overwhelmed. Each of these emotions carries different information and requires a different response. When emotional awareness becomes more precise, emotional regulation becomes more effective. You cannot address a signal clearly if you cannot identify it accurately. The third principle is the emotion-action gap. Between the moment an emotion appears and the moment you act on it, there exists a small space. Within that space lies your freedom. Most people collapse this gap immediately. The feeling appears, and action follows without reflection. But a quiet mind allows the gap to widen. You feel the emotion fully, but you do not rush into action. Instead, you observe the sensation, notice the thoughts accompanying it, and give your mind time to decide what response will serve you best. This does not weaken your emotions. It strengthens your ability to guide them. The fourth principle is emotional alchemy. Every emotion contains energy. Anger contains intensity and drive. Fear contains heightened attention. Anxiety contains anticipation. Frustration contains motivation for change. When emotions are misunderstood, this energy becomes destructive. When emotions are understood, the same energy becomes constructive. Anger can become determination to correct injustice. Fear can sharpen preparation and awareness. Frustration can fuel creativity in solving difficult problems. Emotional alchemy involves transforming emotional energy into purposeful action. Instead of resisting or indulging the emotion, you redirect its power. The fifth principle is emotional regulation under pressure. Maintaining emotional balance during calm moments is relatively simple. True emotional mastery appears when the environment becomes difficult. During stressful situations, the nervous system naturally increases emotional intensity. Heart rate increases, attention narrows, and instinctive reactions appear quickly. Training the mind to remain aware during these moments requires practice. You begin with small irritations. When someone interrupts you, notice the impulse to react. When plans change unexpectedly, observe the frustration that arises. When criticism appears, feel the emotional response without immediately defending yourself. Each moment becomes training. Gradually, your nervous system learns that intense emotions do not require immediate reaction. They can be experienced without losing control. The sixth principle involves emotional contagion. Human emotions spread between individuals more easily than most people realize. When you enter a room where people are anxious, your own nervous system often begins to mirror that anxiety. When you spend time with enthusiastic individuals, their energy can elevate your mood. This process happens automatically through subtle signals, tone of voice, facial expression, body language. Without awareness, people unconsciously absorb the emotional states around them. Emotional mastery involves developing emotional sovereignty. You remain aware of the emotional environment without becoming controlled by it. This does not mean becoming emotionally distant or disconnected. It means maintaining stability while responding with empathy. You can understand another person's frustration without becoming angry yourself. You can support someone experiencing sadness without absorbing the entire emotional weight of their experience. The final principle is emotional integration. Every emotional experience contains lessons about your values, needs, and patterns of behavior. After experiencing a strong emotion, you can reflect on the situation. What triggered the feeling? What need was revealed? How could I respond differently next time? This reflection turns emotional experiences into sources of wisdom. Instead of repeating the same patterns, you gradually refine your understanding of yourself and others. Over time, emotional mastery transforms the way you move through the world. You become less reactive and more intentional. Emotional storms still appear, but they no longer dominate your actions. Instead of being pushed by feelings you do not understand, you begin guiding them with awareness. And when emotional mastery combines with the clarity of a quiet mind, something remarkable happens. Your relationships begin to change. Chapter 12. The Art of Conscious Relationships. Your relationships reveal the true state of your mind more clearly than any private reflection ever could. When you are alone, it is relatively easy to maintain calm awareness. You can sit quietly, breathe deeply, and observe your thoughts without interruption. But the moment another person enters the situation, especially someone close to you, your internal patterns begin to surface. Old habits of communication appear. Emotional triggers activate. Expectations and assumptions influence how you interpret what others say and do. This is why relationships often become the greatest training ground for mental clarity. Most relationship difficulties are not actually caused by the specific events people argue about. They are caused by unconscious reactions between two individuals whose minds are already filled with internal noise. When two reactive minds interact, misunderstandings multiply quickly. One person speaks impulsively. The other interprets the words through their own emotional filter. A defensive response follows. Soon, the conversation becomes less about solving the issue and more about protecting personal identity. But when even one person in the interaction brings a quiet mind into the situation, the dynamic begins to change. Calm awareness slows reactions. Listening becomes deeper. Space appears where understanding can develop. The foundation of conscious relationships is presence-based connection. Most people listen while preparing their response. Their attention moves back and forth between the other person's words and their own internal commentary. While someone is speaking, the listener may already be thinking about what they will say next, how they will defend their position, or whether they agree or disagree. This divided attention prevents true understanding. Presence-based connection requires giving your full attention to the other person in that moment. You listen, not to reply, but to understand. You notice the tone of their voice. You observe the emotion behind their words. You allow their perspective to unfold before forming your own response. In a world where distraction has become normal, this level of attention feels rare and powerful. When people experience genuine presence, they feel seen. The second pillar of conscious relationships is emotional attunement. Emotional attunement means sensing the emotional state of the other person and responding in a way that acknowledges it. If someone is excited, you allow yourself to share their enthusiasm. If someone is grieving, you create space for their sadness. If someone is anxious, you offer stability rather than amplifying their worry. This does not mean absorbing every emotion around you. Instead, you remain internally stable while responding with empathy. A quiet mind makes this possible because it allows you to recognize emotions without becoming overwhelmed by them. The third pillar is curiosity over judgment. Many conversations break down because people quickly jump to conclusions about what another person means. Instead of asking questions to clarify understanding, they assume they already know the other person's intentions. Curiosity interrupts this pattern. When confusion arises, you ask questions designed to explore the other person's perspective. What do you mean by that? Can you help me understand how you experienced this situation? Curiosity invites dialogue rather than confrontation. The fourth pillar is conscious communication. Communication becomes destructive when people speak impulsively without considering the impact of their words. Conscious communication involves pausing before speaking, especially during emotionally charged situations. Instead of reacting immediately, you ask yourself a simple question. What outcome do I want from this conversation? If your goal is understanding, your tone and language will naturally change. One practical approach involves speaking from your own experience, rather than making accusations about the other person. Instead of saying, "You never listen to me," you might say, "I feel unheard when we talk about this issue." This shift reduces defensiveness and keeps the conversation focused on the problem rather than personal attacks. Another element of conscious communication is timing. Some conversations cannot succeed when emotions are already too intense. In these moments, the wisest response may be to pause and return to the discussion later, when both individuals can engage with greater clarity. The fifth pillar of conscious relationships is boundary intelligence. Many people misunderstand boundaries. They assume that setting boundaries means pushing others away or creating distance. In reality, healthy boundaries allow relationships to function more effectively. Boundaries clarify what behaviors you are willing to accept and what conditions you require to feel respected. Without boundaries, resentment often accumulates beneath the surface. People suppress their needs until frustration eventually erupts in conflict. Clear boundaries prevent this cycle. A boundary might sound like this: "I'm willing to discuss this topic, but not when we are both upset. I value our relationship, but I need time to think before responding." These statements communicate respect for both individuals involved. The final pillar is appreciation. In many relationships, attention gradually shifts toward problems. People begin noticing what their partner, colleague, or friend is doing wrong rather than acknowledging what they are doing well. Conscious appreciation restores balance. It involves regularly expressing gratitude for the positive contributions others bring into your life. This is not empty praise. It is recognition of the effort, kindness, or support that might otherwise go unnoticed. When people feel appreciated, they naturally become more open to resolving difficulties and strengthening the relationship. Over time, practicing these principles transforms how relationships function. Conversations become more thoughtful. Conflicts become opportunities for understanding rather than battles for dominance. Trust grows because people feel safe expressing themselves honestly. Perhaps most importantly, relationships begin reflecting the clarity you have developed within yourself. Each interaction becomes another opportunity to practice awareness, empathy, and intentional communication. And as these skills deepen, they create a foundation not only for better relationships, but also for extraordinary levels of performance and creativity. Because when the mind is clear and relationships are stable, your mental energy becomes available for something far greater. Conclusion. Your mind is the most powerful instrument you will ever possess. Every decision you make, every relationship you build, every opportunity you recognize begins within it. When the mind is scattered and reactive, life feels chaotic and uncertain. But when the mind becomes quiet, something extraordinary happens. Clarity appears. You begin to see situations more accurately. Your responses become intentional, rather than automatic. Challenges no longer feel like threats, but opportunities to apply the awareness you have developed. The noise that once dominated your thoughts gradually loses its influence. A quiet mind does not mean a life without difficulty. Obstacles will still appear. Emotions will still arise. Uncertainty will still exist. But you will meet these experiences differently, with calm attention, with thoughtful action, with the confidence that your mind is capable of guiding you rather than controlling you. Every moment becomes an opportunity to practice awareness. Every conversation becomes a chance to listen more deeply. Every challenge becomes training for greater clarity and resilience. Transformation does not occur in one dramatic step. It unfolds through small, consistent choices. Each time you pause before reacting. Each time you return your attention to the present. Each time you choose awareness over distraction. These moments accumulate, and over time, they shape a life directed not by noise, but by wisdom.